The air in Maplewood was thick with the scent of damp earth and dew-kissed grass, as a gentle morning breeze swept through the branches of the monumental oak trees that lined our streets. This town, my home, was painted with hues of nostalgia. The vibrant facades of houses with white picket fences, the quaint little shops that stood along Maplewood Avenue, and the constant chatter of neighbors exchanging pleasantries. I loved this town. I loved my childhood there, teeming with laughter and joy before it all came crashing down like a house of cards. I stood there, staring out the kitchen window, my hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, the warmth a comforting reminder of the chaos that had unfolded. It was not just the house heating up in the early morning sun, it was my heart, boiling with anger and resentment. How could she? I thought bitterly, reliving the image burned into my memory of that day, a moment so raw and painful that even years later it still cut deep. It had started slowly. I could barely remember what it was like before the atmosphere thickened, the shadows wrapping around what was once my vibrant home. I had been too young to fully comprehend the changes, but I sensed it, an undercurrent of unease pulsating in our home. There were missed calls and arguments that echoed softly through the walls when I was supposed to be asleep. My sister Lily, oblivious to the turmoil, had continued to build forts with pillows in the living room, while I sat there, anxiety wrapping around my chest like a vice. One day, though, the facade shattered. "Amelia, could you help me with this?" My mother called from the living room, her voice lilting in a way it hadn't in a long time. Curious, I put down my book and padded down the hall, the worn wooden floors creaking beneath my feet. I peeked around the corner, and there she was, my mother, laughing, her bright smile lighting up the room. But it was not directed at my father. Instead, there was a man with her, his face unfamiliar, his laughter deep and rich. A chill slithered down my spine, and I felt frozen in place, like a deer caught in headlights. I stole a glance at them, my breath hitching in my throat. She looked so happy, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, a contrast to the sorrow I had come to know. "It felt so good to talk to you again," she said, leaning closer to the man, her fingers brushing against his arm, and the warmth that once enveloped our house dissipated into a bitter frost. That was the moment the dagger struck, and it twisted deeper as the truth slowly unfurled before me. My mother's affair came to light like a storm cloud gathering overhead, dark and foreboding. I could remember my father's face when he learned the truth. It was agony, pure and unfiltered. Every hope and dream he had, every thread of our family's fabric shattered like glass, scattering everywhere, impossible to collect. What remained in the aftermath was a quiet sorrow that infiltrated our home. My father lost his business. I watched him transform from the vibrant, idealistic man who used to beam with confidence into a shadow of himself. The friends who had laughed in our kitchen vanished, leaving the laughter behind. I could vividly recall my mother's attempts to comfort him, yet those empty words could not mend what was torn. The haunting echoes of despair intertwined with each memory, and the haunting stillness replaced the joyful sounds that once danced through our halls. My heart clenched painfully in my chest. "Why?" I wanted to scream, but it was a silent agony that wrapped around my throat. "Why would you do this? To us? To him?" The questions remained, never finding solace. I watched helplessly as my father grieved the life he had built, his dreams, his family, everything now reduced to dust under the weight of betrayal. As the years wore on, the anger grew inside me, simmering like a volcano on the brink of eruption. I was losing my childhood, a collateral damage casualty in a war I never asked to fight. It gnawed at my insides, twisting and turning, and became an unyielding desire. Revenge took root. The betrayal, I told myself, had left scars that I could not voice, not to my family, not to anyone. I could still see her clearly, my mother, in those moments when I confronted the truth. The way her eyes flickered when we passed each other in the hall was etched into my mind. It was almost as if she were a ghost, fading into the walls of the house that had held us together once. "Amelia, can we talk?" she had asked once, her voice faltering as she reached for me, but I would not let her touch me. "I need to understand why you did this," I had replied, my voice steady, but the storm inside me swirled dangerously. Now, standing at my kitchen window, I made a decision. While I could not undo the damage she had caused, I could confront her, reclaiming the narrative of our lost honor. Amidst all the anger, there was a clarity in my purpose. I would expose her for what she had done, let the town see the truth hidden in shadows, bringing light to the betrayal that had caused us so much pain. I could hear the words swelling within me. "It is time, Mother," I whispered softly to myself, while the sun rose higher in the sky, casting an illuminating glow upon the quiet streets of Maplewood. Days turned into weeks, each fleeting moment thick with anticipation. My resolve didn't waver. It only grew stronger, ripening like fruit in spring. I could no longer ignore the way Lily had begun sensing there was something amiss, asking me questions I was not ready to answer. I could see the worry etching lines into her forehead, the innocence flickering from her eyes. "Amelia, what is going on with Mom?" she had once asked, her voice small, her fingers poking dubiously at the table in front of us. I could feel the weight of her question hanging in the air, a noose tightening around my heart. "Nothing, Lily, just, things are a little complicated right now," I replied, forcing a smile that felt melancholy, yet her eyes searched mine, unyielding yet fragile. I could not allow her to be burdened with this weight, nor could I lie to her forever. A part of me wished to shield her from the truth, the shattered pieces of our lives now tinged with regret, but I needed her to understand that our lives would never be woven back together without confrontation, and perhaps a measure of revenge. The plan began to crystallize in my mind. I would gather evidence of my mother's indiscretions, collect the pieces of what had been lost from our family, as if I were piecing together a tapestry of betrayal. I needed to walk through memories that haunted, to face the truth of what our family had become. It would be delicate, painful, but necessary. I recalled walking past her room one evening after dinner, my heart pounding as I paused at the door. This was it, the point of no return. I pushed the door lightly, cringing at the sound it made as it opened, and entered into the twilight-lit room. It was so serene, so deceptively peaceful. My mother was there, a silhouette against the soft light, her silhouette glowing and yet shrouded in darkness at the same time. "Amelia," she had called softly, her voice cutting through the stillness of the room. I could hear the quiver in her tone, an indiscernible mix of apprehension and longing. "Just checking on you," I muttered, my heart racing as I stepped further inside. Something inside me ached for her, the hope that I could reconcile the woman I used to know with the stranger who destroyed my family. "Have you been okay?" she asked, her tone threading with concern, but it felt hollow. I could barely nod in response. I stepped forward, rooted by some unexplainable force, looking around her space. It felt like stepping into a painting, memories suspended in time. The soft fabric of her armchair sat invitingly near the window, photographs lined the walls, capturing moments of joy that now felt like betrayals. "How could you?" I asked suddenly, tears brimming, but my voice was steadier than I expected. "How could you throw away everything we had?" But she fell silent, and I realized she was tangled in her own web of guilt. "Amelia, please," she began, but I could not bear to let her finish. I needed her to understand the impact of her choices. "No, don't please me. You lost everything, our family, our laughter. I've seen the toll it has taken on Dad. You don't understand what it was like to watch him wither away." Her eyes glimmered with something I could not place, sadness or remorse, perhaps. "I never meant for things to turn out this way," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "But you did, you made your choice, and now you have to live with it. I deserve to know why," I insisted, the words erupting from somewhere deep within. I felt like a volcanic eruption, my emotions flaring and breaking free. She lowered her gaze, and for a moment the silence was deafening as I waited for her to acknowledge the truth. "Amelia, I was lost. I lost myself in my own desires in a world that made me feel alive for a moment," she finally said, her hands trembling in her lap. "But those moments shattered everything else. I never wanted to hurt you or your father." The admission hung heavy in the air. I could see her pain reflected in her eyes, yet there was no absolution for the betrayal. "You wanted affection from someone else. You abandoned us," I choked, bitterness coursing through my veins. "I never wanted to abandon you," she said, her voice cracking. "I just lost sight of everything that mattered. My heart was weak." "Your weak heart destroyed us," I said, my voice steady, although the tears threatened to fall. "But now I will make sure everyone knows. You will understand the gravity of what you have done." I turned and left the room, my mind racing, the adrenaline of my resolve pulsating through every fiber of my being. As I walked down that familiar hall, my heart felt heavy yet relieved. No more unanswered questions, no more silent anguish. I was tired of the shadows that haunted my family. It was time to step into the light, to face whatever came next. I glanced back at the door, my mother's soft sobs echoing behind me, a final reminder that this journey would not be without pain. But in that moment, I felt a sliver of hope pierce through. I was ready to uncover the truth, to forge my path and reclaim everything that was lost. No more silence, no more ghosts, only justice with renewed purpose. I began to plot my path toward revenge. This wasn't a mere whim. It felt as essential as the air I breathed. I confided in my younger sister, Lily, whom I knew shared the same mix of anger and confusion coursing through me. It was in the delicate balance of our emotions that we found our strength. We became two shadows moving through the nights, hunting for evidence that would expose our mother's deceit. The thought of our mother's betrayal wrapped its icy fingers around my heart, squeezing more fiercely with each layer we uncovered. "Can you believe this?" I whispered, my voice barely rising above the rustle of the wind outside. The attic was cloaked in darkness, the faint light of a single bulb casting eerie shadows on the walls. I flipped through the dust-streaked photographs, each one a window into happier times, moments preserved in time that now felt tainted. How could she do this to us? Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, her wide eyes reflecting both fear and determination. "She lied to us, Amelia. She acted like everything was fine. Why did she never tell us?" Her small hands were trembling, clenching and unclenching like they were trying to grasp a truth that was slipping away. "Maybe she thought we wouldn't understand," I suggested, hoping to untangle the mess of emotions inside me. "But look at this letter." I held it up, the crinkled edges soft against my skin, trembling at what it meant. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was evidence, a weapon in our silent war against a mother who had become a stranger. "A love letter?" Lily's voice rose in disbelief, filled with the sharp edge of betrayal. She leaned closer to inspect the faded ink on the paper. "To someone we don't even know?" "Yes, it drips with affection. Look at these words." I inhaled deeply, reading aloud the beautifully wrought lines that tore through me like jagged glass. "I cannot stop thinking about you. Every moment is a reminder of what we could have if only circumstances were different." Ridiculous, that's how she felt, while she was pretending to be a perfect mother. "Why do people have to be so complicated?" Lily murmured, her brow furrowing. "Why can't they just be honest?" "Because honesty hurts, Lily, and sometimes it hurts others too much." My heart felt heavy as the weight of our task settled deeper within me. Each discovery only fueled my fire, and yet it also felt like I was racing toward a cliff's edge, knowing every step could lead to an ugly fall. My heart pounded. What if we expose her? What if everything we unveil just pushes our family apart more? Then it's better to know, right? At least we would have the truth. Lily's voice wavered, uncertain, but there was conviction behind those words. The air was thick, heavy with the gravity of our decisions. We persisted. Weeks slipped by in a blur of whispered conversations and late-night expeditions into the depths of our family's history. The more we uncovered, the emboldened we felt, yet fear gnawed at my heart like a persistent rat chewing through the remnants of my sanity. It was a delicate game, and one wrong move could weaken my carefully constructed plans. I hastened to corral my thoughts, remind myself that we were on the brink of revelation. Everything has a price. I would tell Lily every time doubt seeped in, a warning, a riddle that hung over us. With each shadow we chased, I felt like we were dancing on a razor's edge, stepping closer to an unknown abyss. One dreary evening, we found ourselves in the attic again, surrounded by dust and memories. "Do you remember when Mother took us to the beach?" Lily's voice cut through the stillness, a thread of nostalgia weaving through us. "Yes," I said, my mind instantly flickered back to that day, with the sun shining down and my mother effortlessly mixing laughter with the warmth of wishes. "Back then, life was simple." "I miss that," she whispered. "But it feels like we are opening a Pandora's box. What if it changes everything?" "Change can be good," I said, hopeful yet unsure. "But it can also lead to pain. I'm not going to pretend it won't." "But staying silent? That will only fester like a wound." Lily's eyes widened in realization, allowing the moment of silence to deepen. "You're right." Her voice was steadier now, strengthened by a newfound resolve. "We can't let this go. We need to know what we're working with." In the dim light, I watched as the sediment of our task settled again, the weight pressing down more keenly than ever. It was a war, albeit one fought quietly in the shadows, but a war nonetheless. We continued after that, unearthing secrets that should have remained hidden. But with every small victory, the weight of our task grew heavier, pressing down upon us like a storm cloud threatening to unleash its fury at any moment. I tried to wrap my mind around the secrets, weaving them into my understanding of her, the mother I had idealized, now reduced to a figure of shame and betrayal. Confronting our mother on such a scale was not just my fight, it was a specter that loomed over both of us. Failure wafted in the air like a heavy fog, and I sensed the stakes rising. The darkness of my thoughts began to consume me, igniting an internal battle between the morality that had been instilled in me since childhood and the fierce desire for justice that clawed at my insides. What if exposing her leads to more harm than healing? I muttered aloud one night as I paced my room, the furniture shadows flickering around me. What if it tears us apart? Lily, startled from her own stupor, replied with a conviction I couldn't muster. But you can't protect something that was never real. That's just a mask hiding the truth. I paused for a moment, her words sinking deep like stones thrown into a still pond. What if I lose my family? What if she? She might never forgive me for exposing this. Maybe she deserves to face what she did to us, Lily insisted softly, yet her words carried the weight of a hammer striking down on a chisel. We owe it to ourselves to fight for the truth. Nothing should be hidden anymore. Each encounter with my mother seemed to build a wall between us. Her casual dismissal of my emotions left me feeling like a misfit tapestry, frayed at the edges, unraveling slowly as I confronted her about the whispers I had been hearing. Amelia, stop being so dramatic, she said one evening while I had taken the leap, unable to hold back the torrent inside me. Her tone was calm as she poured herself a glass of wine, seemingly unfazed by the emotional storm brewing. You should learn to let things go. Let it go? You think we should just let it all slide? I found the letters, your lies, I exclaimed, my voice rising, heart racing in indignation. How is this not the most significant thing in our lives? She waved her hand dismissively, a gesture that felt like it sliced through my heart with momentary clarity. You should focus on your own life. Adults have complications, you wouldn't understand. Complications? You mean betrayal? I spoke, voice trembling with fury. How can you reduce this to complications? You built our lives on these lies. Her expression shifted, irritation flaring like an ember before she quickly masked it. This is not a conversation worth having, she said, her voice straining, her posture stiff. She swept past me, leaving me stood alone, feeling helpless and unseen in my own home. Despair flooded through me. It had been an almost mocking dismissal, reducing the gravity of my emotions to mere annoyance. I felt helpless and alone, my world spiraling downwards. I slumped against the wall in my room after she left, frustration overtaking me. In the stillness of the night, as the darkness wrapped itself around me, I realized I was on the edge of something more profound than mere betrayal. It was a landscape of hurt I had never been prepared to navigate. I scraped a hand through my hair, warm tears streaming down my face as I pondered over my choices. Each silent sob felt more isolating than the last. It was as if I was fighting against a tide that would inevitably drown me in betrayal. But underneath the despair, I felt a fire simmering, refusing to be extinguished. I could not allow this to be my life, to suffer quietly while the injustice continued to eat at my family from the inside out. I wanted to scream, let loose the torrent of emotions that had become a roar inside me, searching for release. So, with steely resolve, I wiped my tears away and gathered the pieces of my shattered spirit together. This was no longer just about me, it was about justice. I leaned closer against my desk, the cool surface grounding me amidst the chaos. There had to be a way to strike one final blow that would yield results, a culmination of everything we had uncovered so far. In the quiet moments of the ensuing days, I became even more determined. My sister and I worked side by side, like two sorceresses conjuring spells in the witching hour, fueling each other's spirits into something beautiful and terrible. And as every breath pulled me deeper, I felt something awakening inside, a resolve that would not be quelled. I would confront her in a way that would reveal every secret, shining a light on the shadows that had been festering. Are you with me? My words were stronger now, laced with certainty. Lily looked at me, her eyes fierce. Always. And in that moment, it felt as if we would navigate these dark waters together, armed with the truth that would dismantle the illusion of family we once cherished. Together, we would unearth the roots of deception, and from the depths of this darkness, we would rise. The final blow was to come, and we would strike it as one the stars illuminated the night sky as the evening approached, a chilling reminder that the night of reckoning was finally here. The dining room, which had once been a place filled with laughter and warmth, now felt heavy with tension. I couldn't shake the feeling in my stomach. It was a mix of fear and adrenaline, stirring like a storm inside me. I glanced around the room, noticing how every detail of its dim lighting seemed to accentuate the memories of happier times. The shadows cast by the flickering candles danced on the walls, elongating the outlines of the furniture, creating an atmosphere both haunting and empowering. My heart thumped in my chest like a drum, resonating with the gravity of what I was about to confront. Beside me, Lily stood silent, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of the stakes. I turned to her, searching for an anchor in the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Are you ready for this? I whispered, my voice barely audible above the eerie silence that filled the room. She looked up at me, her dark eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight, a mixture of determination and fear there, an echo of my own feelings. "We have to do this, Amelia." "For Dad," she replied, her voice steady yet tinged with urgency. It was a reassurance I needed as we readied ourselves for what felt like a tidal wave of truth about to crash over our eager, vulnerable family. The heavy wooden dining table, now adorned with remnants of meals past, loomed in front of us. I noticed the faint smudges from where I had set earlier family dinners, remnants of happier days becoming increasingly distant. My father entered the room then, his gait slow and deliberate, each step a reminder of the distance that had grown between him and the rest of us over the years. He looked older than I remembered, his face lined and weary, the weight of silent battles evident in the way his shoulders sagged. His eyes flickered between the three of us, resting on the table as if seeking clarity in the chaos that had become our family. "Amelia, what is this about?" my father asked, his voice breaking slightly as he took his seat, hands clasped tightly before him. The sight of him looking so small broke me, even as the fire of determination surged within. I pushed aside my fragmented emotions, focusing on the trembling hands that threatened to betray the resolve I had fought so hard to build. "I've called us here tonight for a reason," I began, my heart pounding against my ribcage, "to address the darkness that has hung over us for too long." My mother, sitting across from me, shifted in her chair, her fingers gripping the armrest as if it were a life raft. "That darkness is your actions, Mom. It's time we face it." With trembling hands, I carefully placed the love letters and photographs on the table, each item a tangible representation of the betrayal we had endured. The letters, faded but still carrying the scent of broken promises, lay there. They were remnants of a love that shouldn't have existed, bleeding into our reality. My heart raced as I began to speak, the words flowing out like a heavy tide. "Mom, do you remember when you decided to throw away everything we built? When you opened the doors to a world of shame and deceit instead of love and loyalty? I remember, even if you buried it deep inside." I could see the transformation that struck her features, the way her face paled, wrestling with shock and indignation. Her brow furrowed, and for a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity for her. Almost. "Amelia, this isn't what you think," she retorted defiantly, her tone hardening into an icy shield, desperate to protect the facade she had built around her choices. Yet the arrogance of her indignation wouldn't deter my mission. "No, Mom, it's exactly what I think. I won't let you avert your gaze from what you've done. Do you even comprehend the destruction your decisions inflicted on Dad?" I pressed on, recalling the nights I had watched him drown in his despair, silences stretching between us, heavy, suffocating. "I'm tired of living in the shadow of your mistakes." He had been a ghost of his former self, dulled by disappointment, shackled by a trust that had been shattered into countless jagged pieces with no hope of reformation. Rage illuminated the once vacant stare in my father's eyes, a flicker of life brought back by my words. He looked between us, confusion and anguish battling within him, the pain evident on his face. "You have no idea how hard this has been for all of us," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it resonated through the room. "You blame your mother, but this family, this love, it was fragile." There was a tremor in his voice that I had never heard before. I could feel Lily's eyes brimming with tears as she regarded our mother, examining the cracks in the perfect image our mother had maintained for so long. I had to break through her defenses, had to strip away the layers of shame she had constructed to shield herself. As my mother opened her mouth to speak, I cut her off, heart racing as I allowed the words to flow without restraint. "You lied to him, you lied to us, you let another man into our lives. The letters are proof. Do you ever think of the consequences your choices had on our family?" My voice rose, echoing in the dimly lit room, where the air felt static, heavy with unspoken truths. I pushed every ounce of emotion into my words, wanting her to feel the weight of the hurt she had cast over us. With every word, I noticed my mother's facade crumbling. Her eyes glassed over, the shame washing over her like a tidal wave, choking her bravado. She fell back against the chair, utterly defeated, drawing her arms around her body as if to shield herself from the reality we were laying bare. "I never meant for any of this," she whispered, her voice cracking, and I could see the long-buried guilt clawing its way to the surface. There was a part of me that wanted to soften, to forgive her in that moment, but that fragility would disarm my purpose. I wanted justice. I wanted to reclaim a reality I felt had been stolen from us. "It doesn't matter what you meant," I said, my voice steady yet piercing. "The friends you chose to surround us with, everything that you turned your back on, those actions crafted the void you see before you now. Dad lost everything because of you. We lost so much because of you." Memories crashed over me, pushing through like waves on a beach, fierce and unforgiving. The family vacations we could not take, the laughter that had turned to silence, the sheer idea of normalcy had crumbled. Each recollection hounded me like a relentless ghost, memories of a life unlived because of choices made in secrecy, choices that had left scars deeper than any could imagine. He finally stood, pacing the room, tension radiating off him in waves. "This will not stand, Amelia. This is not the time or place for these accusations." He was trying to diffuse the situation, to restore some semblance of order, but I saw the storm brewing behind his eyes. The raw power of this confrontation was beyond their ability to suppress. I refused to suppress it any longer. I saw my father switch gear, the break in his voice transformed into unyielding determination. "You can't just ignore the pain we've been through," I snapped back at him, my heart urging me to lay bare everything that had rotted beneath our family's surface. "Don't you see? The truth is finally coming to light, it has to." Lily's voice broke as she stepped forward, her emotions spilling over. "Mom, how could you do this to us?" She glanced at our father, her own heartache feeding into the pain echoing in our small home. I watched the turmoil overtake my mother's features as she fought to respond, guilt visibly weighing her down. "Lily, please," she whispered, the fight draining from her tone. "You don't understand. What we understand is that you were selfish. You hurt us for your happiness," I stated, not backing down, while we were left to pick up the pieces. Finally, with tears welling in my father's eyes, I saw him slip back into the husk of the man I had once known. "Amelia," he said, his voice breaking as the emotional dam we had built began to crack, "I never wanted any of this." This was the moment. The truth was resonating through his barriers, breaking through the decades of silence. "I know you didn't," I breathed, meeting his gaze. "But you were here, you let her have that affair. I watched quietly as the silence suffocated you both." And as I finally spoke those words, unleashing that pent-up pain, I felt a lightness, as if I had lifted a weight off my chest that had haunted me for nearly a decade. Yet her expression morphed into one of sorrowful acceptance. I tried to make it work, but I became lost. You have to understand." The tremors in her voice were palpable. She seemed small and fragile, a far cry from the confident woman I had once seen. "But at what cost?" Lily pressed gently, her own pain spilling over. "Mom, we've lost everything because you wanted more than you could handle." I reveled in the moment, as I knew the years of my father's pain were finally being acknowledged in front of the person who had planted the seeds of deceit in our lives. The atmosphere shifted, the truth standing bare before us like a sword held to the throat of our collective lives. My heart raced, but it was coupled with an unexpected rush of satisfaction. "Tonight is not about hatred, but about acceptance," I spoke carefully, feeling the weight of my own resolve. "But we cannot move forward without first breaking these chains." As my mother sat there, surrendering to the damning truth, I felt an intoxicating sense of freedom wash over me. Breaking the silence had broken the wall that had kept us prisoner for too long. The burden feels lighter, and for the first time, I had reclaimed not only my voice, but also every ounce of strength I had ready to face whatever came next. I watched as what had once been buried in shadows came pouring out into the light, shimmering amidst our loss, creating a bridge toward the future we had yearned for. Yes, this confrontation was only the beginning. Pain was woven into the fabric of our family, but for the first time, we were standing in the light of honesty, stronger together, ready to confront whatever lay ahead in the aftermath of that monumental confrontation. When the air was still thick with remnants of anger and confusion, our home morphed into something I had only seen in movies. A place steeped in quiet intensity, where even silence seemed to speak, murmuring about the wounds cut deep and the scars yet unhealed. The air was heavy, saturated with an overwhelming kind of tension, broken only by the sound of ragged breaths. As I stood in the living room, the remnants of our family life scattered like leaves after a storm, I witnessed a shift that felt almost tangible. My father, filled with a potent mix of pent-up rage and sorrow, began to rise from the ashes of betrayal. I had feared the man I loved would wither away beneath the weight of our mother's treachery, but in that moment, I realized he had begun to reclaim himself. "Amelia," he said one evening after being so quiet for days, a newfound spark flickering in his brown eyes. "Do you remember those fishing trips we used to take?" I nodded, a smile creeping onto my face as my mind flitted back to sun-drenched afternoons by the lake, moments where laughter floated through the air like melodies. "I think I'm going to get back into it. Maybe I can bring some old friends along." "Really? That would be amazing." I felt the excitement bubble up inside me. It felt like the sun breaking through clouds that had long overshadowed our lives. You should call Uncle Joe and bring him back into the mix. He always had the best stories. As the words left my mouth, I noticed the hesitation in his expression begin to dissolve. I could see the hesitant glimmers of hope starting to ignite in his eyes, like tiny embers waiting for a breath of air to bring them to life. The atmosphere began to change around us as laughter returned, tentatively seeping into every corner that had once echoed with grief. We were starting to build a new rhythm, one that felt fresher, more vibrant. My mother, the woman who had once seemed so unwavering in her confidence, now appeared to be nothing more than a shadow of her former self. The sparkle in her eyes had dulled, replaced by a glaze of despair. It was the gentle hum of her life's drama pulling her down into a whirlpool of regret. She stumbled around the house, as if navigating through thick fog, desperately trying to piece together the wreckage of her reputation that lay scattered in the wake of her betrayal. It was hard to watch, the juxtaposition of dinner table laughter versus the silent suffering that painted her mornings in dismal gray. "Dad, do you think she realizes how much she has lost?" I asked one evening while we were taking inventory of our old family photo albums, the smell of aging pages surrounding us like a soft blanket. "I think she does," he replied, his voice low as he traced his finger across increasingly faded photographs of happier days. "But that realization sometimes makes it worse, believe me. People look at us differently now, even they don't want to." His sadness washed over me like a cold wave, but I reaffirmed my resolve to rebuild, not just our family ties, but also the pride that had been stripped from us. I glanced at my sister seated nearby, her expression awash with unspent emotions, remnants of her past resentment surfacing just beneath her composure. I recognized it, a mirror of my own feelings. "Hey, why don't we try something new?" I proposed suddenly, a spark of inspiration igniting in my chest. "Let's focus on creating memories, just the three of us." Lily looked up, her dark curls bouncing slightly at the movement. "You mean like a project?" she asked, her eyes widening with interest. "Exactly," I exclaimed, leaning forward with enthusiasm. "We can revive family nights, board games, movie marathons, cooking gigantic meals together, whatever we want. It'll be fun." Dad's half-smile returned, and I could see pride lifting his spirit, reflecting on the effort we were putting into this fragile reconstruction of our lives. "Sounds like a plan," he affirmed. "Let's do it." So we did. We dedicated evenings to reminiscing about happier times. Sometimes, I would bring my guitar out into the living room, strumming simple melodies that could weave laughter through the room like spells of comfort. "Remember when I wrote that ridiculous song about the dog next door?" I teased one night as Lily hurriedly pulled the lyrics from her memory like pulling old clothes from a dusty box. "Something about Barker the barking monster, right?" Lily laughed, and the sound was music to my ears, brightening up the dimly lit room and lifting that veil of heaviness even just for a moment. "That was epic," Dad joined in, his laughter mixing with ours, a sound long absent from our lives. "I think we need to hear it again." And as I played those goofy notes, I could feel the bonds strengthen. Playing and laughing felt like mending stitches in a tattered quilt, slowly filling in the void left by betrayal in unexpected ways. Sometimes, we would take breaks from the games and share stories about things we once enjoyed as a family, piecing together remembrances like a puzzle we had long abandoned. One night, with shadows creeping about the corners of our living room, we gathered around the fireplace. Dad recounted tales about his childhood. "You should have seen me at your age," he chuckled, a faraway look in his eyes. "Traipsing around the woods with not a care in the world, building forts and dreaming up grand adventures." "Seriously, Dad?" Lily asked, her jaws dropping in mock disbelief. "Did you really build a fort? Don't tell me you stuffed your teddy bear inside and pretended to be a knight." "Absolutely," he grinned slyly, happy to play along. He was my kingdom's prized protector. As we laughed, somehow pushing the weight of the past a little closer to the edges of our minds, I could feel the pieces of our family reassembling. This reemergence of joy felt almost magical. In our unity was an unshakable strength blossoming in the very heart of our home. One rainy afternoon, the three of us curled up above steaming mugs of hot chocolate. Lily whipped up a spontaneous poem on a whim, her fingers dancing across the side of a parchment sheet. "Two mugs, two hearts, one family that blooms," she recited, and the warmth in her cheeks was now tinged with hope. "Are you writing about us?" my father teased, leaning closer with an unusual light in his eyes instead of disdain. "Of course I am. We are rebuilding, the lost laughter returns." she beamed, the firelight flickering upon her face like a light of its own, dispelling some of the surrounding gloom. I barely stopped to think about our mother's isolation. It was as though we had collectively agreed to turn our backs on the darkness she cast upon our lives. I remembered her disappointed face when I had told her about our plans after the confrontation. The heavy silence hadn't felt satisfying then, but now I let the memories slip away like shadows captured in a glass. The longer we laughed and cherished our moments together, the more I felt connected to something wholly new, a bond fortified beneath layers of old hurt that had once driven us apart. Lily, who had remained reluctant and hesitant amid the rocky aftermath of our mother's fallout, ultimately found solace in those little moments we created together. The love surrounding us seemed to shine brighter than any pain inflicted upon us. "Hold on, let's make some shapes," Lily exclaimed one night, her curiosity tempting her with a new idea. We scrambled to turn off the lights, and then the room erupted into giggles as we played with flashlights, casting shapes on the walls till they became extraordinary. "Look, I made a dinosaur." I pretended to growl, then jumped at shadows like a kid again. "Rawr, the terror of the night. PFFT, that's not scary," Dad retorted, over-exaggerating his fear with an animated expression. "It's only a fluffy dinosaur." As laughter erupted again, I could see our father lifting weight off his shoulders with every chuckle and every proclamation of ridiculousness. It reached deep into the crevices of his disappointment and began the process of smoothing out the jagged edges. With each passing day, I grew more certain. We had started to heal, genuinely reclaiming the laughter that had once defined us as a family. My heart swelled with pride because it was not solely about our mother's downfall. It was about reclaiming our future and fortifying ourselves against storms we had endured together. As the echoes of laughter danced through our home once again, an intoxicating melody reminding me of days gone by, I realized we had built something truly beautiful out of chaos, a fledgling fortress glimmering with promise. We were the architects of our destiny, tending to the ashes of despair and crafting a legacy from the scattered remnants. "Dad, it's amazing how far we have come," I whispered, gratitude spilling into my words as the evening began to cool around us. "A few weeks ago, this place was so quiet," he said, his voice soft yet steady. "I thought I might never hear laughter again. But look at us now," Lily chimed in, the brightness in her voice contagious. "The new Bennett family, reclaiming our happiness one night at a time. Being together transformed our home into a sanctuary, and every note of laughter harmonized into a song we had long forgot." I held close to my heart that none of this would mean anything unless we moved forward, ensuring that the light of our family's honor would never dim again. I had taken back our family's dignity. The echo of that victory would resonate through Maplewood for years to come.